And welcome back to episode number 101. We're not officially, well, last week we were officially into the triple digits, but now we're working our way up into the triple digits into episode 200. That's a bit away.
Yeah.
For now, episode 101, the New England Patriots. We have plenty to talk about there. We have plenty to talk about with the Red Sox as well. But to start, Ben, how you doing?
Good. Excited. It was certainly a riveting week for Patriots and Red Sox. Celtics too. Some Bruins news. Tonight, Zdeno Chara gets his number retired. It's about all I got on the Bees. I don't really follow them much, unfortunately. But yeah, feeling good. How about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm doing good. I had a raging headache earlier, but I'm feeling mostly better right now.
I mean,
Um,
you have a newborn and a wife, so one of those things is
that's
surely to cause a headache.
that is very true. But all right, let's start this off. New England Patriots come into host the LA Chargers, and what was, I would say, not very much not the game that we kind of all expected. It was a defensive battle throughout most of the game. The Patriots just completely overwhelmed Justin Herbert from start to finish. Drake May started a little slow, picked things up in the second half. He was really good in the second half overall, finishing with a 16-3 victory. And now we host the Houston Chargers. But to start, what were your thoughts on the game and how things played out?
Well, we play the Houston Texans this weekend.
Did I say Houston Chargers?
You sure did. Which is funny because it's ironic with the Freudian slip that so like my thoughts this weekend. I actually see a lot of similarities in how I think the Patriots should and can approach the game both offensively and defensively. They're not carbon copies of each other, talking about Houston and LA by any stretch of the imagination, but I see a lot of similarities. I see similar opportunities the Patriots have to exploit weaknesses. So some keys there. I know I sent you like a book today about my preview for and prediction for the game. But I look at it and go, the Texans, while they don't have as bad an offensive line as LA does, they're only slightly less worse, I guess is a good way of putting it. Pro Football Focus has the Texans ranked 27th out of 32 in their final offensive line rankings this year, which I think it might be a little bit misleading because they didn't give up a ton of QB pressures or sacks. So they seem to be better as a pass blocking unit than they do a run blocking unit. As evidence, I was looking at the numbers today. They're basically a league average offense. They were 18th in yards gained, 13th in points per game. They were the 14th best passing offense, and then they were the 22nd best run offense. They were probably hoping for better stats than that, but Joe Mixon missed the entire season, so they've relied heavily on a fourth or a fifth or a sixth round pick, Woody Marks out of USC. So thoughts on the game overall? I see another defensive slugfest. I'd like to think that there were some intangible factors to last week. Drake May's first playoff game, playoff jitters. And I hesitate to use the phrase career low because the guy only has like 20 games under his belt, but his first half completion percentage of the game was the lowest of any game in his career. I think he was at like 42% completion percentage in the first half, and really turned around in the second half. So I expect him to play better against Houston than he did against LA. So call it playoff jitters. Same thing with Will Campbell and Jared Wilson. Coming off of injuries, probably not 100%. It was Campbell's first real game back. He played against Miami in the season finale. Didn't play 100% of the snaps, and they don't really have any semblance of a great pass rush. I mean, Bradley Chubb's over there, but he's not. He's not any kind of it. He's not an elite pass rusher like what. Khalil Mack is still very, very good in the latter stages of his career. And then, of course, the Chargers have a couple of really good guys. Owe, And there's another guy on that defensive line. I'm blanking on his name right now. But in come the Houston Texans, who by, I guess you could say, league award standards have the two best pass rushers in the game. Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter were NFL first and second team All Pros this year, which is saying something considering Myles Garrett set the single season sack record and was not named to first or second team All Pro. So the Patriots offensive line has to be better. Hopefully, Will Campbell's rookie jitters and possibly MCL not being 100% played enough of a factor that it's another week he's healthy. Needs to get right because Anderson and Hunter are two of the very best. We saw that on Monday night against Pittsburgh. The defense as a whole, I think, it's better than LA's statistically speaking. You could make the argument that Houston has the best defense in the NFL. They have an all-pro corner in Derek Stingley, who, if he's not the best corner in the league, he's certainly top 2 or 3. They have good guys in the back end. They have decent linebackers. Aziz Al-Shahir, say that 5 times fast, is really good for them, flies all over the field. They're really good in the intermediate and the short routes. You kind of saw it in the Monday night game and in the recap that it felt like there were more than 11 guys on defense. So the Pats have to take advantage of other things. The Texans can be susceptible to tight ends. They don't cover them well. And they ranked near the bottom of the league in big play against, which I think by NFL standards is 20 plus yards gained on a single play. The Texans were 28th in the NFL in preventing big plays against the other team. So it really is. It's the same story as last week. The Patriots offensive line has to give Drake May time to find holes in the defense, which is going to be hard. They play a ton of zone and they don't blitz. So there's traditionally going to be, 7 or 8 guys in coverage. And so he's going to need time. If they have an advantage, it's the fact that, Drake May can run, Aaron Rodgers can't, which is why they're able to really tee off on him. On the defensive side of the ball, I think the Patriots have to do what they can to get to CJ Stroud, like they did against Justin Herbert. I don't know as if they'll get to Stroud as well as they did against Justin Herbert. Again, the Texans offensive line is a pretty decent pass blocking unit. But hopefully they can get to Stroud. It looks more and more like Nico Collins is not going to play. He did not practice again today because he has yet to clear concussion protocol. Whereas the opposite is true for the Patriots. Gonzalez was a full participant in practice today, so it appears that he is good to go. So things are trending in the right direction health-wise for the Pats. And, again, it feels like a defensive slugfest. I think if you can score somewhere between 21 and 24 points in this game, if you can score 21, 24 points in this game, I think that's going to be enough. But the line of scrimmage really needs to be the main focus. They got to keep Drake May clean. They got to get after CJ Stroud. The running game doesn't scare me. Woody Marks was decent. Nothing special. I think he was 6th in rushing amongst rookies this year. But he only had like 700 some odd yards rushing. Again, he is losing some carries to Nick Chubb, but he's been their number one guy. But the Pats' strength is their run defense, and that's arguably the biggest weakness on the Texans' offensive side of the ball. So the fact that they're not going to have Nico Collins in all likelihood, I think really plays into the Patriots' hands. But yeah, I'm looking at a defensive slugfest, and they got to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, started with the home game against LA. It was like I said in the intro, it was a little bit surprising of how everything played out. I don't think anybody really expected the Patriots defense to dominate the way they did. Chason is earning himself a bigger payday by the game. So he came out, had a really good game. Milton Williams again. Like, there's not a lot of times you pay a defensive tackle in the open market in it, and I feel like it's worth the money. And he has been everything worth the money so far.
Dare I say he has been a bargain?
Yeah, outside of the injury, like when he's on the field, he's been outstanding for them. And then, a little even to the surprise of myself is they played a lot of man. higher than usual in the percentage of their man coverages. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but
You talking about the
and that
Chargers did?
no, the Patriots.
Oh,
Patriots.
Patriots. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it allowed Gonzalez to really flourish in what he was doing and what his best abilities are. So I'm very interested to see how they approach things this weekend. Like you kind of said, that they're a little bit similar concept teams. The O line for Houston isn't that great. If Nico Collins is not there, that is huge, right? It's tough to play man against Nico Collins. The guy is a machine of a receiver.
Yeah,
Big,
he
strong, fast.
Yeah, he does it all. Great hands. That's the one. That's the
Yeah,
one thing that like, he is. You talk about five-tool players in baseball. He's that equivalent in football. Great hands, runs
yeah,
good routes,
yeah.
and he's fast, and he's got size.
Yep. And so without Nico there, and it looks like Gonzalez should clear protocol tomorrow, but I look at it and say I think that they could play a similar game. When we talk about comparing it to the Chargers offense, I don't know if Stroud's going to be as deer in the headlights as Herbert was, because I don't think the pressure will be as much. But the receivers are worse, and the weapons in
Yeah.
Houston are worse without Nico. Like, saying that, because then you go down the list into, okay, now you got Higgins, Noel, Kirk, and Hutchinson and Schultz. Like, those, they're the top 5 weapons. None of those names like scare you. They don't scare you. And so it would allow them to really kind of dictate how they want to play and how they want to approach it. It's not like they're kind of like, oh, there's a guy like Nico and they really don't want to play man, so they got to play a little bit more of a zone. I think that they can dictate how they want to play it. And then offensively, again, like it's relatively similar to what we saw with the Chargers. Like, they're relatively similar teams in the sense of how they're built. It's going to be a big matchup again for the left side of the O-line for the Patriots. I thought Will Campbell, was good in the run game, was pretty mediocre to maybe just bad in the pass block. Jared Wilson was pretty bad overall. How they stop them and limit the Houston defensive line will come down to really how this game plays out for the Patriots. I will expect them to do a little bit more chipping, a little bit more protection in terms of trying to help out Campbell and Wilson on the left side. So ideally that helps things out for them. But we saw what happened early in the game where they were getting a lot of pressure in at May. And maybe it was a little bit nerves type of thing for the offense, but they struggled early on. And then he started to settle in because they made a little bit of an adjustments. And we saw it numerous times. May struggled in the first half against the too high safety, kind of being forced into certain things. And then they started to really take advantage of it. The main play that I remember looking back on this week was the deep run at the end of the first half. They play two high safeties.
You're talking about from Drake May?
Yep. They play two high safeties. Both safeties go deep because they're too high safety. And then the receivers kind of pull them that way. Stevenson comes out from the center of the backfield and does a route to the left there. And it opens up. May sees that it pulls everybody away from the center of the field, and boom, he runs up the middle. They don't play a ton of man in Houston. They're kind of right around the league average, around 24-25% of snaps.
I thought it was lower than that. I read that the Texans played like almost like upward. Did you say 20-25%?
The league average is around 24%. They play, according to Sharp Football Analysis, 21%.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say because I read that they were in that. Oh, I'm sorry. It was a little confusing because you said it the other way. I was reviewing everything today from a zone perspective. They play zone almost 80% of the time. So yeah,
Yeah,
that
so it's a little skewed though in terms of the average because the Browns sit at 43% man, and the next highest is 32%. So like
yeah.
that's kind of
So they're an
that's ripping
anomaly.
the
So
average up.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So it's like I think the average is probably closer to 22 to 23%. That's where a lot of teams are. The Patriots sit at 28% man. If I just would have guessed that they probably were closer to 35 to 40% man this past weekend.
the Texans
And
were
again, no, I said if I had to guess, I think the Patriots were closer to
okay.
35, 40% man this past weekend.
Yeah, I was listening to Tom Curran and Phil Perry in the post game. They put their podcast up on NBC Sports Boston. It wasn't the post game; it was from the post game. It was from their podcast. And they talked about, and Phil Perry said he was surprised how much man, not how much they played, but that he said that they played more man than he was expecting them to. Um, Given that Justin Herbert is a running threat. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but yeah, it felt higher than normal.
Yeah, yeah. And so, as a whole going into this game, I think I'm pretty confident. I mean, kind of really similar to the Chargers game. Like, I think they're really similar ball clubs, with the exception of I think Houston's a little bit maybe better defensively. And at least going into the game, I felt like the Chargers were a little bit better offensively. Now, you know, Herbert was awful, and by
Yeah.
awful, like some was on his own, some was a lot of it was instigated by the Patriots' approach and good coverage, attacking the quarterback, getting in his head,
Yeah, I don't.
making him feel uncomfortable. And then, but you look at a guy like C.J. Stroud, and I it's more of a joke, but the C.J. Fraud Stroud of my name tag right there. But he had a plenty of turn. He had what was it, 3 fumbles this past weekend? 5 fumbles. I thought it was 5 turnovers or
Oh,
fumbles.
he had 5 fumbles. He lost 2 of them. And
Okay.
when I say fumbles, he fumbled in the sense of a traditional fumble 3 times, and there were 2 fumbled snaps, which are technically credited to him because they happened in the shotgun. So
Okay, that's why I had seen 3. I
yeah, so
missed like a
he
decent chunk of the game on
yeah.
Monday night.
But to your point, he had so it's a little misleading, but yeah, he'd had 5 fumbles. 2 of them were botched snaps. But to that point, I think that why there's some importance on being able to at least pressure CJ Stroud if you can't really get to him is that I think you can rattle him in a sense that if things aren't going well for him, he's not a guy that's going to take off and run. Like, can he scramble? Yes, but he doesn't. At least not to the level that Drake May does. So, if you kind of peel back the layers on why I think the line of scrimmage is important both ways, if you can rattle CJ Stroud, especially and I know I started with this off the top, where aside from being ruled out, Nico Collins is not playing Sunday. He did not practice today, and so it's not like it's a hamstring or an ankle or a shoulder, that they can just shoot him up with some cortisone. The problem with the concussion is that he has to clear hurdles, and given the number of hurdles he has to clear in a single practice, the likelihood that he plays is basically zero. Again, you can't say that it is zero because they haven't ruled him out yet, but I would expect that tomorrow they'll officially rule him out. So if you can rattle CJ Stroud and he doesn't have his number one wide receiver, I think that you could force him into some turnovers, and that I know, like, prior to the Chargers game, there's the whole aura around Justin Herbert of him being, like, he shrinks in the postseason, and he gives the game away because he turns it over. He infamously threw 4 turnovers against the Texans last year in the playoffs, and they lost. He didn't. I think he only had 1 turnover against the Patriots, but he was under constant pressure, and I think that you can take some of that pressure, and I think you can force CJ Stroud into some mistakes and make him kind of look like what they did to Justin Herbert last year. Maybe not quite that bad. I don't think they're going to force Stroud into 4 picks, but if they do, then holy cow, like, the Patriots might run away and hide in that scenario. But ultimately, I think that you can rattle CJ Stroud if you can get some pressure on him. And to your point, they don't have world-beating wide receivers. He's not exactly a world-beating quarterback. Like, we're not looking at like the '99 Rams greatest show on turf. Like, this offense shouldn't scare anybody.
No, in the way the Patriots defense is playing, you have to feel confident in that matchup. If you're you're Houston, you're coming into this game and saying, well, they struggled offensively a little bit versus the Chargers, so we can do that again too. We can come in and struggle. The difference there is, and I posted about this earlier a day or two ago, is going into the game, Drake May's been great all year long. That's why you should feel more comfortable with the Patriots than CJ Stroud coming in and playing a phenomenal game. CJ Stroud doesn't rarely ever dominate a game, play lights out.
No,
he plays some good games. He plays some average games. You kind of know what you're going to get with him more often than not, and it's good, not great. But then he also has some big flunker games. The defense won that game this past weekend, right?
yeah,
they have
the defense scored 14 points for him.
Yeah, exactly. So, and people will look at.
And I will say real quick, like a caveat, not for nothing, the pick six came when the game was already out of hand, and Aaron Rodgers was just trying to make a play to try to make some kind of a run.
Yeah. But people look at it the same way for the Patriots, but that's the difference is May has been elite all year long. So it's just kind of it's just a different conversation. Now, you look at Houston Twitter and they're certainly rolling up into the fact that, they haven't done it against anybody. Well, that's just not really true. And it doesn't matter the fact that they're playing NFL teams and they were dominating all year long offensively. The biggest thing for them, I think, offensively will be establishing the run game again.
Yes.
I think it's something that they didn't do tremendously well this past weekend. And it kind of hurt them. If they are able to establish the run, that's when the play action helps. And like you mentioned, Houston's has been susceptible to the big plays. That's when the big plays down the field can open up and become more of a factor. Derek Stingley, great receiver. Great corner overall. Has been susceptible to those big plays, especially him. They got two really good safeties, but again, they play a little bit better coming downhill than they do going deep. Not that they're liabilities or anything like that. But that's right. How I think the biggest difference for the Patriots approach is facing LA was more, they're going to take away the deep ball. You need to be more patient, take what you get, go downfield. And we saw that. The Patriots didn't really have a big deep ball play. I guess the biggest one was to Booty that wasn't over the top either.
Reception one. So the longest reception belonged to Ramondre Stevenson. He had a 48-yard catch. That was immediately after the fourth down stop in the red zone. But other than that, there was a 42-yard to Kayshon Boutte. And
even that was it was a deep ball, but it wasn't up over the top of the secondary either.
Right. Yeah, I think it was I think if I remember correctly, it was in the second half, and it was an out route that the corner just couldn't quite get to. And I think Boutte tightrope the sidelines. I think that was the play.
No, he ran up deep, and then he kind of brought him in more. He came in towards the center of the field to catch it.
Okay, because I know he had another big catch on the sideline, and then
that one just wasn't as deep. But anyways, that's the biggest difference, and I think their approach would be, it was, LA was more in the middle of the field in terms of intermediate to short passes. I think the Patriots, if they can establish the run, will be able to open up the deep ball more than they did against the Chargers for sure. If they're able to do that, I really like their chances. If they can't do that, they're going to be in another slugfest of a low scoring game. Last I checked, the over under was 40.5, I believe. So we'll see. I don't know if it's moved off that point, but that's.
Sorry, I had
You
to let
there?
the dog out. Yeah, I'm here. Were you saying the over under for this game or for last week?
This game, I think, is 40.5. And so it might have moved since the last time I looked, but I really like the Patriots' chances in this game.
Still 40.5.
Okay. Yeah. I really like their chances this game, but if they're not able to establish a run, they're going to be in another slugfest. They're going to be in a situation, because Houston can create pressure. Houston's got a good defense. And, you don't want to get into the games where you have to win them 16-3, 16-10. Like, that's where there's room for error of, the defense lets up one big play, blah, 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 blah. And so, I really like going into this week. You have to feel very confident with the Patriots defense. And I guess optimistic that this past weekend was more of just a blip in the radar offensively. So, I mean, I know you kind of sent your prediction. What was your final one?
I had Patriots 23-16. I think that the Texans are going to struggle to score points with Nico not here. It wouldn't shock me if the Patriots get a defensive score and that helps them with the difference in the game. One thing I did want to bring up, just because we had alluded to it before with CJ Stroud and being able to put pressure on him. So this is according to Pro Football Focus, and tip to Maz from Felgrad Maz, who posted this on his Twitter page, his X page. So against the blitz, this is comparing CJ Stroud to Drake May. Passer rating: CJ Stroud 92.1, Drake May 117.7. There's a gap there noticeably, but here's where it really makes a huge difference in terms of who's going to make you pay more than the other guy. Touchdown to interceptions against the blitz in 2025. CJ Stroud has 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions facing the blitz. Drake May has 13 touchdowns and 1 interception against the blitz in 2025. So, I mean, passer rating is pretty volatile in terms of, like one big play, positive or negative, can really influence that number. But obviously with, he has 10 more touchdowns and 1 less turnover against the blitz. That's obviously a pretty sizable gap. So, I guess to kind of tie that in, like, if Pat's 23-16, wouldn't shock me if the Pats get a defensive score, pick 6 type of deal. Again, especially with Nico Collins out, I'm not exactly sure how he'll scheme it up defensively. Because the Patriots are going to be at full strength, at least on the defensive side of the ball. There's a couple of question marks with like Thayer Munford and a couple
they
of
were
those
all
guys,
at practice today. So
yeah, Munford and Tonga were both limited, but Tonga was a full participant. Munford and Landry,
Moses.
I think, Jennings. Jennings was also limited, okay. But they're all going to play. But again, they might just be banged up. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if the Patriots have a defensive score, and you see a situation where it's like, Drake May only throws a touchdown, they get 1 rushing, and then there's a defensive score, something to that effect, maybe. But yeah, that's kind of where I got to with the 23-16.
Yeah,
just because I think Houston's going to struggle to score.
No, I agree, and I think Houston's only path here is they have to basically shut down May, and we've seen that as very, very difficult to do for a full game. You may get him for a half, and then he kind of figures it out, and they make adjustments. So, like, I just struggle to see them putting up many points either. Like, without Nico, they don't run the ball tremendously well. They don't protect Stroud tremendously well. Like I said, like, Stroud can come out and make some big plays, but like, he's not a guy that's going to light you up. No. And if the Patriots are playing very, very good defense, I look at this and I say, I think this is a situation where they can hold another team under 16, 13, hell, like, around 10 points. Do you want to bet on that? Obviously not. Like, this is the NFL. And then offensively, I think that they got a good approach of how they can play things out. And if they can establish a run and do what they did last week defensively, again, I'm not expecting 3 points. Like that's that's a little bit unrealistic going into the game. But
yeah,
I think 23-16 is a really good prediction. I'll probably sit right around 24-13 type of thing.
okay.
And that, that doesn't mean it's going to be a steady handed, like easy win. I think it will be a competitive game. I'm not looking at this and saying there's no chance Houston can win this game. I mean, Houston's got a really good defense. And when you got a really good defense in the NFL, you have a chance in every playoff game, especially. They don't say defense wins championships for fun. It's true.
It's true. It is true.
Yes. So I'm sitting at 24-13. It really comes down to what you said. I struggle to see Houston put up points unless it's the Patriots making big blunder mistakes, which again could happen. But
right. Yeah, I mean, Will Anderson could beat Will Campbell around the edge and strip sack Drake May, and it results in a Houston touchdown. Like I think that,
or like a blown coverage can have Jaden Higgins going 75 yards down. Like obviously anything can happen in this league, but that's kind of where I sit. But all right, I do want to transition into some Boston Red Sox to finish the second half of this. Ranger Suarez signed to a 5-year, $130 million contract. Since the last time we talked, Alex Bregman is no longer available. He's signed with the Chicago Cubs. That's kind of where I want to start off here is, what were your thoughts when you heard that news and all the kind of wrinkles that have come since then about how it played out? And then what are your thoughts on this first, hopefully what seems to be a step one of a pivot in signing Ranger Suarez?
Obviously I was pretty disappointed that, what I thought was going to be reality happened with Alex Bregman going somewhere else. I kind of have, mixed emotions, mixed feelings about the whole thing. Cause, recent history would tell you that the Red Sox don't love to spend money. These last two off seasons, now that we sit here with them, committing 130 million to Ranger Suarez being a reality, it's, maybe they're making a move back to spending, because they have been 10th or worse in payroll spending well, not worse, but 10th or lower in payroll spending for the last 3 seasons. I don't blame Bregman for leaving. I'm not sure, how much I believe of the reports, just because, the Red Sox have a propensity to say they're going to do something and then either not do it or do something else entirely. So it's kind of hard to believe the reports that come out of Red Sox camp about like what actually took place. But multiple people are reporting that, the offer to Bregman was 5 years, 165, with the original word was significant deferred money, which is subjective and makes you think like, okay, well, what exactly does that mean? And it seems like it was less than what Bregman ended up taking in deferrals from the Cubs. I believe the Cubs deferred 70 of the 175 million they gave him. The Red Sox reportedly were only going to defer 45 based on a Buster Olney report. The one sticking point being that apparently the Red Sox philosophically do not believe in a no trade clause, which is ultimately what moved Bregman to take the Cubs offer as opposed to the Red Sox offer. I can sit here and say fairly confidently that if the Red Sox were willing to offer him a no trade, that he probably would be here, and that he would have taken the 10 million less with 120 million in the next 5 years, basically 5,120 versus 5,105, and then factoring in the deferrals later. If the Red Sox were willing to do a no trade, I feel like he would be here. With that said, in this case, you don't have Ranger Suarez, right? they could basically gave the money they were going to give to Bregman to Suarez. They just they just weren't going to defer any money. They just basically guaranteed him an extra $10 million over the next 5 years, compared to what Bregman was going to get. So, I'm happy for Bregman. I'm glad that he got what he was looking for. Again, he's 32 and he's got 2 young kids, and so he wanted the stability, to have the control over where he played out probably the remainder of his professional career. Obviously, he can waive his no trade clause if he really wants to, but then the ball's in his court. He can dictate if he wants to leave Chicago. If they sell and there's a new owner, new owner, new GM, new whole operation, and he's like, hey, like, I just want out, then he can waive his no trade clause if they want to move on. But then it's basically up to him. It's not like, the Cubs can't just roll out of bed, 2 years from now and decide that Bregman's not part of their team and move him without his permission. So, happy for him. Wish him the best. I kind of wish his tenure in Boston obviously was longer and lasted, and was better. I know he missed significant time, and the Red Sox, if they didn't lose Roman Anthony and they didn't lose Alex Bregman for all those games, they probably could have made a legitimate run to a World Series. Whether they got there or not, you don't know. Loved watching him play. But where we sit at this point, I would say, I think the Red Sox, as of this moment, you could argue have the best starting rotation in all of baseball. After they give Ranger Suarez,
which is just wild thinking about where we were like 2 years ago.
Even a year ago, it was like, well, there's Garrett Crochet, and then there's a bunch of question marks. I still think you could argue that they had a better than league average starting rotation on paper, but there were still question marks about what you were going to get out of Brian Bayo, what you were going to get from Giolito a year removed from Tommy John surgery.
Yeah.
What were you going to get from Tanner? Like, the back end of the rotation was a huge question mark, and it's like, they were looking at Brian Bayo potentially being your number 2, and this year he's your number 4, arguably. Because you figure your rotation is probably going to be Crochet, Suarez, Gray, Bayo, and then probably Oviedo as your 5. After that, you have other options, right? Where, maybe somebody else, makes a push, a Connolly early or a Peyton Tolley, or perhaps the Red Sox decide that they're going to move one of those guys because they need to figure something else out with the rotation, which they still have plenty of question marks. As it stands right now, if somebody hits the ball to third base, nobody's there to field it. Same thing at second, nobody's there to field it. So hopefully there's more shoes to drop. You're muted, by the way. So hopefully there's more shoes to drop.
Mayor's at one of them.
But you don't know where.
Well, they can't both be empty, so you could pick one of them.
Well, that's fair. But so one of those positions right now doesn't have a body. So be interesting to see what they decide to do. It was nice to see. I didn't dig into this, but it's got to be years since the last time the Red Sox offered a quote unquote middle-aged starting pitcher a long-term big money contract. You probably have to go back to David Price, who signed prior to 2017. And I'm not even sure if that's accurate. Like, I'd have to, how old was David Price when he signed with the Red Sox? You're muted again.
I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up.
Let me see. So they signed him December 2015 is when he signed his 7-year, $217 million contract. So in December of 2015, so David Price was born in 1985. So he had just turned 30. So 10 years ago is the last time I can remember the Red Sox giving a quote unquote middle-aged pitcher, which is what you are at 30. You're middle-aged as far as your baseball career. This is the last time they gave a big money contract to a middle-aged starting pitcher.
I don't like the word 30 and middle-aged being put together.
Well, here's the thing. You're not a major league starting pitcher, so you can't be classified as a middle-aged big league starting pitcher.
I know, but I still don't like them put together. As someone who turns 30 in approximately 8 days, I don't want to do that.
Approximately 8 days, but who's counting?
Yeah,
approximately. So hopefully when we're recording for in advance, I guess post AFC Championship game, we'll celebrate your 30th birthday with we'll talk about when the Red Sox are going to be Red Sox, good God, when the Patriots are going to be flying out to Santa Clara to play against, whoever
Yeah.
for Super Bowl
Yeah.
60. But yeah, it was nice to see the Red Sox were willing to actually give like a respectable big money contract to a pitcher. Now, granted, those aren't top of the mark. That's not top of the market money anymore. And I'm not trying to take away from what they did. I'm not trying to take away from the signing of Ranger
But you're
Suarez,
kind of going to.
but it's still, but no, I'm just saying it's like, while it's not a, you know, it's not like a, it's not like they offered, say they signed, Garrett Crochet is what, 26? I know that they kind of gave him a deal until he was 30 because, who really knows what happens beyond then. But it's not like if they had given Garrett Crochet, like an 8 to 10 year contract in his mid 20s, like that's what a top of the market pitcher deal looks like nowadays. Whereas when pitchers are 30, like I guess when you're 30, 5 years and 130, $150 million is big money for that age, even if it's not like a top of the market contract. It was still nice to see them give 5 guaranteed years and 130 million guaranteed to a 30-year-old pitcher. Well, not just a 30-year-old pitcher, a 30-year-old player. Like they were only willing to go 3 years
Yeah.
and like 80 some odd million to Pete Alonso, who, like, no offense to Ranger Suarez, was a better fit to fill a hole on this Red Sox roster. Like the Red Sox needed a right-handed bat and they were looking to upgrade at first base, and they weren't even willing to give him like a legit contract, which he ended up taking in Baltimore. It was, but so, in the end, it's nice to
I think
see
they
that.
offered basically what they offered Suarez. I think they around 130 million.
No, their offer to Alonso was 3 years, 85 million.
Okay, well, I don't know why I thought it was 130 million over 5 years, but
No, I think that was the rumor, but then when it came out, it was that the Red Sox were significantly under, and it was only a 3 year deal. And then somebody reported like 2 or 3 days later that it was 3 years and 85 million. Because I think that if the Red Sox had offered Pete Alonso 5 years and $130 million, he would have come here because he wanted to play here. He just got the offer in Baltimore was so much better. So it's nice to see. And the last thing I'll add in, and then I'll let you chime in. So it's kind of a double-edged sword with what I've been hearing on X and other social media platforms is how do you like classify the signing of Ranger Suarez, right? Because you lose out on Bregman. So it's like, well, this is them just trying to save face and sign Ranger Suarez. It's like, okay, but what if the Red Sox lost out on Alex Bregman and then decided to sit on their hands? Like the media, the fans, the underbelly of Red Sox Twitter and social media would be blasting the organization for that was the only plan. Like, it's like, okay, well, you have all this money, like you still have things to do, go spend it. But then, you have people that are complaining and being like, oh, well, they're only signing Ranger Suarez because they lost out on Alex Bregman. It's like, okay, well, that's what big market competitive teams do. You lose out on player A, then you pivot and you go, okay, like, what is our next plan? You lose out on plan A, execute plan B. Plan A was Alex Bregman in a vacuum, right? I don't know if Alex Bregman was always plan A from the very beginning because there were some conflicting reports there. But plan A, sign Alex Bregman. Doesn't work out. Okay. Well, plan B is we can sign this other guy who can be a legit number 2 starter. And we need one of those guys, even though we traded for one and traded for 2 starters in Oviedo and Gray. So, yeah, they pivoted and they responded by spending money elsewhere. But isn't that what they're supposed to do? Like we would be slamming John Henry if he didn't sign Alex Bregman, and I mean, I know it's not him. Obviously, he's the one that has to officially authorize spending, but we'd be marching on Fenway with pitchforks and torches if it was, oh, well, we didn't sign Alex Bregman. Okay, well, this is what we got. Like, we can throw Sadon at second base and Marcelo can play third, and we'll just figure it out. Like, we'd be burning Fenway to the ground if that was what they did. So, yes, the response move was sign Ranger Suarez. Cool. That's what you should have done. You should have gone out and signed Ranger Suarez.
Yeah, I mean, losing out on Bregman, I'm not like furious about it because, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I thought that that's an overpay. And the famous quote by Freeman was like, you got to be willing to be irrational in free agency.
I thought it was uncomfortable.
I don't know, one way or another.
I know.
Whatever it is.
I know. I said like be comfortable being uncomfortable. Real quick, but just before you finish that point, just a simple yes or no question. If the Red Sox had signed Alex Bregman to a 5-year, $165 million deal, and let's just say for shits and giggles, it's the exact contract, but they were willing to give him the no trade clause, so that he had control over where he finished out his career. Would you have come on the pod and been on X saying that giving Bregman $26 million a year is an overpay?
Well, what do you mean 26 million a year?
Well, $36 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, I would have come out and basically said, like, look, like, am I happy to have Bregman back? Yes. Do I feel like that was an overpay? Yes. And then, I would have probably in the same breath kind of said, like, with all that said, like, at least props to Henry, like, for paying up to get what they wanted, you know what I mean, type of thing, even if I thought it was an overpay. I think Suarez is an overpay. I think 5 years, 130 for Suarez is above what at least I thought he would get. And so, I kind of look at it pretty similarly, where it's like, I think it's a little bit of an overpay, but like props to them for getting it done and paying up and getting them here.
I mean, to be fair, Spotrac listed his market value at $27 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, I that was his market was going to be around 25 to 27.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's the end all be all, that like they're the dictators of what market value is, but that's where.
Yeah, I mean, I would have been like, 4 years, 90 million type of thing. I was probably sitting more in that range for a guy like him. I think he's good. I think he's a baller in the playoffs. And so that's, a big bonus, especially in Boston. But I felt like it was a little bit of overpay. But again, like it's not the end of the world. They went and got a guy that's going to help them win. And that's obviously the biggest factor. Now, the question is, where do they go from here? They have a ridiculous surplus of pitching, just an absolute ridiculous surplus.
Which again is considering where they were within the last 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, you would have to assume Crochet, Suarez, Oviedo, and Gray are pretty much locks for the rotation. I would the top three guys are for sure. Oviedo, I think I have a hard time them trading for him and then him not being.
Yeah, unless something like, unless there's some information that they get from other GMs and teams around the league that indicates that somebody might be available via trade and it's going to take Oviedo. If the Red Sox, learn, and I mean, fill in the gap with any legit bat. Like if they have an opportunity to add a legit bat now that maybe wasn't available a month ago and it would cost them Oviedo to do it, sure. But to your point, I would say it's like a 95% chance that Oviedo is your number 4, number 5 starter going into the season, assuming he doesn't get hurt. But I'd be genuinely surprised if they flipped Oviedo after acquiring him this offseason.
Yeah, and so you look at that, and that I didn't include Brayan Bello, excuse me, and he's walked into the rotation as it currently stands. It's just a question of if they will be keeping him. There was talk that they were shopping him around. I'm a fan of moving on from him. I think he's a good, not great pitcher. I don't think he's a number 2. I think he's more of a number 3, mid-tier 3 guy. So if you can get him for like a low end 2 value, like I would be on board for it.
Yeah, I think looking around to tell somebody and say that like the Brayan Bello of 2025 is the Brayan Bello. Like, yes, he's 26, but he made 29 starts. He pitched 166 and 2/3 innings, the most of his career. 3.35 ERA. He's not going to strike guys out, and those were certainly down this year. But you'd probably have to settle with somebody evaluating him as a low end 2, a legit number 3 starter.
Yeah, exactly. And so, looking around and beyond those 5, you got Crawford, you got Sandoval, you got Tolley, you got Early, you have Harrison as well. So you have this big surplus of pitchers and options for them. The question is, what do you do with them? And the most obvious answer is they need to go get another infield bat. Do you have a specific name that you're looking at here that, obviously there's the Bo Bichette. Go get Bo Bichette, and there you go. You got you got your bat, and you could still trade a pitcher for something else or in a package to improve somewhere else. But where are your thoughts here, and what do they do? Like, what's the next move?
So, I mean, aside from naming names, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, they have to go get an infield bat. I know is it Sammy Jones? I know you basically said you wanted to like pour lemon juice in your eyes over the trade proposal that he threw out there. I think it was lemon juice you said, where it was like, would you trade Brian Bayo, Jaron Duran, and Juan? What's Juan's last name? I'm blank. Varela? You're muted. Stop muting yourself.
Valera.
Valera, thank you. And he was like, would you make this trade and trade those 3 guys for Ketel Marte? And you were like, I'd rather pour lemon juice on my eyes. And he kind of didn't understand why. I mean, obviously Ketel Marte, in terms of the name, makes the most sense in terms of like the Red Sox have the pieces that the Diamondbacks might be interested in. The Diamondbacks may or may not want to move on from him. The Red Sox need a second baseman. So like in that sense, like there's certainly pieces there. There's smoke to that fire. The Diamondbacks have basically said they're not really looking to move him. They did just trade for Nolan Arenado, so he's pegged in at third. You've got Geraldo Perdomo at short. There's talk that they might be moving Jordan Lawler to the outfield, which makes me wonder if they really they might love Jaron Duran, but Jaron Duran doesn't really fit. Like the outfield is they have a similar logjam situation in their outfield that we do. They have a top prospect coming up. They've got Corbin Carroll, they've got Alec Jones, like they've got guys on that team. Like the outfield is kind of set for them, and they're trying to figure out where do they put Jordan Lawler, who was the number 6 overall pick a handful of years ago. But he doesn't really have a role. Like Perdomo's locked in at short, and no, I mean, even though he's 35, 36, like he's not starting over Nolan Arenado. Like, let's be real. I keep coming back to, and I know that we talked about this, we were texting about it earlier. I come back to, I think the best move for them is to trade for Isaac Paredes. I know Bo Bichette's name is out there. I just don't see the Red Sox doing what it takes to sign him, because you're talking about a big money contract. Now, granted, he's 27, so he's probably worth it with the bat. He fits the need defensively, but between their financial commitments already, now that they've signed Ranger Suarez, I haven't seen the updated spreadsheet on what their financial guarantees are for this year relative to the luxury tax.
I think they're $4 million over the second threshold,
which is what, 260 ish,
something like that.
Yeah. So I know that they're in like the 260 to 270 range. Like signing signing Bo Bichette moves you most likely, based on the rumored contracts, would move you closer to 300. I don't know if the Red Sox are going to do that. The thing that I keep coming back to, which is why I don't think which is pushing me towards, I don't think the Red Sox do it, which is why they didn't go after somebody like Kyle Schwarber, is that Bo Bichette declined a qualifying offer, and because the Red Sox were over the luxury tax, they would be losing $1 million in free agent international spending money.
Yeah, but they did that with Suarez too,
and 2 draft picks. Suarez, they did it with Suarez with the qualifying offer.
Yeah, they lost the second and 5th highest picks in $1 million. I don't know what happens if they sign 2.
I'm not exactly sure. So I think so. Milliken, I think, tweeted this. So I think it's now it becomes their third and their sixth round pick, not their second. They would still lose $1 million, and they still lose their second and fifth highest picks, which are now a third and a sixth round pick. So I don't think so. That would mean the Red Sox would be without a second, a third, a fifth, and a sixth round pick in the upcoming draft. I don't think they do that. If they're going to make a move for a bat, I think it needs to come via trade for if not because of the financial implications of signing. Realistically, the only other bat that makes sense on the market would be Bo Bichette, right? Like, Kyle Tucker's still available, but Kyle Tucker creates a bigger problem for you because now you have to trade outfielders, like, and you still don't have a second baseman and a third baseman. So trading for a guy like Isaac Paredes, I think makes a ton of sense. Houston supposedly was interested in Connolly early. If you can talk them off of Connolly early, great. I don't think that Connolly early is a hard no for me. I think I'd be happy. Like if it's Connolly early for Isaac Paredes, sure. Like I'd probably be fine with a 1-for-1 trade. Like if it's Isaac Paredes and more for, I'm sorry, if it's Connolly early and something else of real value, I think that it's like, okay, well now it's kind of that's more of a consideration. I know I threw out like, would you trade, Connolly early and Mickey Romero for Paredes, and you were a hard no on that. I think that, I think there is a trade to be made there. Like, would I trade somebody else like a Brian Bayo? Like, would I trade Peyton Tolley in a deal for Isaac Paredes? Yes. So I think like that to me makes a ton of sense. He's a guy who, profiles, especially at Fenway with the way that he swings the bat. He profiles as a 30 homer guy. He's not going to have 100 RBIs, but he profiles as a 30 homer guy. Maybe he's in the 75, 80, 85 RBI range, which is pretty good. Not elite, but it's still pretty good. I keep coming back to him. He's decent defensively, and he can play both corner spots. He's young. I think he's 26, 27. And so he offers, given the positional flexibility, like if Wilson Contreras either needs a day off or gets hurt, or, you're trying to play some kind of matchup for whatever reason, Wilson Contreras just doesn't hit a particular pitcher very well for whatever reason, you can move Paredes to first, and then you can just platoon somebody at third for a game and then figure it out. So the positional flexibility, you have the pieces that I think you can acquire the player. And the fact that, he becomes a solid right-handed hitting power bat that right now, like, Contreras is good, but I think if you add a guy like Paredes, you have two legit good right-handed hitting power bats in the middle of the lineup. Considering, excuse me, that you no longer have Alex Bregman.
Yeah, I mean, I think option one is certainly Bo Bichette, obviously. But considering I think it's tough to expect that by any means. Paredes makes a lot of sense. There's still Brandon Donovan that could fill in, but he's a lefty bat. There's the guys in Chicago, Horner and Shaw, that both could theoretically be moved now that Bregman is there. But like you said, like the thing is they could go sign Bo Bichette, and like they would still have this huge surplus of pitching and outfield talent, where like now instead of needing that right-handed bat, you could go get a Freddie Peralta just for the freaking fun of it with that surplus and young talent. And you know what I mean? So it's like,
yeah,
they have the option, and that involves more spending. And Peralta, adding Bo Bichette and Peralta, because Peralta's on an expiring contract, is obviously a whole nother conversation. But you get my point. Is like, if they went and just signed a Bo Bichette, he is perfect for this lineup, exactly what they need. And then that they would still have the surplus to improve the roster in other fashions. They could go and upgrade again at the rotation in terms of like moving Bayo and a piece for a better pitcher, or you go and trade for a high-end catcher, or you go and trade for another elite bullpen arm. Like they have all these options if they want to. Even without Bichette, they have the options to improve this team in multiple different facets. It's just a matter of how they're going to do it. But I mean, it's always been my option A has been Bo Bichette. Right now, if they're going to make a trade, Paredes sounds like the most likely option, but we'll kind of just see how it plays out. I guess we could go around in circles for an hour about names and options and stuff like that, but
Right.
that's kind of where it is. The next step is you got to go get that righty bat, and whether they could go and just sign a guy like Bo Bichette or swap the third baseman Suarez, I guess is technically still available. I don't like the idea of him because right now you have 3 pitchers that are in the top 10 percentile in ground balls. That tells you that you need to have a good defensive infield. Story is solid. Mayer is good. You would put Suarez, who is not good defensively, at third base. It's just I want to avoid that. Bo Bichette, not great defensively, but if you could slide him at second, you can make that work a lot more easier than a guy at third. So, any final thoughts here on the Sox? I mean, obviously, like I said, we could go in circles, but it's more of just a wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, final thoughts. I mean, again, I come back to I'm glad they spent the money. I've been of the opinion that in the end of the day, it really is just money. Like you're not giving up a potential, asset on your team. It's just cash, and I understand that rich people stay rich because they don't spend their money. But John Henry and Sam Kennedy and Tom Warner and all those guys are in the business of not just making money, but putting a product on the field that puts butts in seats, and you kind of have to spend money to have a winning team. So it's a little bit of a vicious circle there, but I'm glad they spent some. I know that last year we kind of got a taste of, sweet, they traded for Crochet, and I forget when they signed it. They signed him in spring training, but it was nice to see that they got the deal done. But again, we still had that. Okay, well, yeah, but they gave a 5-year deal to a 25-year-old. And it was nice to see that they extended themselves for, again, a 30-year-old pitcher when they lost out on a 32-year-old third baseman. So it's, I was kind of down in the dumps for a while because, again, they kept losing out on free agent after free agent after free agent. They and not always because they didn't have quite enough of a competitive offer, but, they lowballed by market value. They lowballed Pete Alonso. They didn't show any interest in some of these other guys. And, it was nice that they went out and they made moves and they finally signed a guy. We can finally say that we're not the only franchise this offseason to not sign a free agent. And, I think that, we talked about in football, defense wins championships. Well, pitching and defense wins championships more often than not in Major League Baseball than offenses do, especially in October when it's cold. So, they have a surplus of pitching. They might have the greatest pitching rotation in AAA baseball history, depending on how the rest of this offseason works out. Maybe we'll actually have to book a trip out to Worcester because, at this point, they're not going to have Peyton Tolley or Connolly early on the road, on the big league club. So, and of course, they still have Dick Fitz and some other guys.
No, Dick Fitz is in St. Louis.
Oh, that's right. They traded him. They traded him and Hunter Dobbins. I thought it was just Hunter Dobbins.
No, both of them. They traded Dick Fitz for Gray, and then
that's right. And then they traded Hunter Dobbins. That's right. I forgot that they both got traded to St. Louis. Anyway, but yeah, I mean,
make it a third.
Yeah, right. They should be.
Donovan.
They should be competitive. Obviously they got to figure out a second and a third baseman, but I would say that there's some cautious optimism that they'll do it, and that one of those guys probably doesn't currently play on the roster. So. I'll be happy to spend some money and go to a Red Sox game this year, which I probably wouldn't have said that 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, I posted the 2 options of Bo Bichette and then this or that, and then option 2 was go get a big pitcher, and then now you get the surplus to make the trades. And that was working in kind of like reality of what was realistic. Obviously, if they go get Bo Bichette, and I posted about this, you go get Bo Bichette, like, John Henry earns all the belief back and earns everything back from the fans. Like you're making a big statement that like you're not a fraud of an owner if you go get Bo Bichette right now on top of Suarez, obviously. Yep. But as it currently stands, yeah, I mean the rotation's very good right now. Even as the lineup currently stands, it's not like a bad lineup. It just needs that at least one more piece. And then, I mean, you can talk about for days what they'll do in the offseason, in the outfield, excuse me. But they need that like number 4, number 5 bat to help kind of put them over the top and put a finishing polish on that lineup. And then they do need to add to the bullpen another piece or two, a lefty arm or two. But that's, again, that could go down in circles on that conversation. But okay. That's going to wrap it up for this week. Like I said, we got Houston this weekend. Hopefully when we're back next weekend, we're talking AFC Championship game. Maybe the Patriots are hosting, depending on what happens in Denver. I know you wanted to ask that. Who do you want to play?
Yeah, so I'm going to update and say 24-16 Patriots, so that they get that third touchdown. So I'll kind of lump this into some final thoughts about the Pats as well. I'll just reiterate, feeling confident, if they take care of the ball, and I think they need to scheme up protections along the offensive line. I don't think they did enough last week to protect Drake May using the running backs. Obviously they're the professionals. They obviously saw things on tape or didn't see things on tape for why they didn't do that. So in terms of, doing the look ahead, which I can do as a fan and being on a podcast, the players certainly can't look ahead because they won't get there if they do. But, if the Patriots win, I see there's pros and cons to playing either team. Starting with Denver, the Denver Broncos, number 1 seed. I think they're, in terms of how the team is built, they remind me a lot of LA and Houston, but better. They are elite defensively. They're kind of a middling offense. Denver didn't score a ton of points. I think they were 14th or 15th in points scored this year. Having said that, I would take Drake May over Bo Nix. The Patriots were undefeated on the road, so that doesn't bother them. But historically speaking, Denver is not a place that teams find a ton of success in terms of going in and winning. Not saying you can't beat Denver on their own field. It's certainly been done before. But the idea of having to go to Denver against that defense in that environment is not really appealing. Again, Tom Brady went there twice in 3 years, and lost both times. Came close once. The other time didn't come close at all. So there's that. The other side, the positives of playing the Bills, then the game would be here. It'd be nice to have the home crowd and possibly win an AFC Championship game here in our building. However, the NFL is a quarterback-driven league, and I don't really think you can argue that there's a better quarterback in the NFL than Josh Allen. I love what we have in Drake May. Josh Allen he's older, he's more experienced, and in terms of just raw ability, I think he's a little bit better than Drake May is right now. Yes, he's older, so if I was going to start a team, I might pick Drake May over Josh Allen because I'm getting 7 extra years of playing time. But you look at Josh Allen, and he single-handedly beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. If they didn't have the MVP caliber player that Josh Allen was in that game, in terms of how he played, they don't win. I know that Trevor Lawrence gave them a little bit with the turnovers, but Josh Allen scored all 3 of their touchdowns. Josh Allen is the reason why the Buffalo Bills were opening 1.5-point favorites against the Broncos in Denver. It flipped. Enough people were like, well, this is crazy. Denver's the number 1 seed. There were enough bets in on Denver that it flipped, and Denver's now favored by 1.5. But, we know the NFL is a quarterback-driven league, and you don't oftentimes pick against the quarterback if there's a gap. It's why teams it's why we, 98.5, and, I know that, Tom Brady wasn't in the league when our at least he wasn't a Patriot when this podcast started, but it's why when you look back, people didn't pick against Tom Brady because he proved time and time again that picking against him was a mistake. And you don't pick when there's a big gap in the quarterback play, you typically don't pick against the better quarterback. I would not be comfortable playing Buffalo here. I'm not even convinced we would be favored in a game against Buffalo here, considering the Bills were opened at -1.5 at Denver. And theoretically, people would give Denver a bigger edge than us because Denver's the number 1 seed. Ultimately, it's hard to not want to have the game in your own building, especially where the Bills don't have Gabe Davis, or is it Kevin Shears? Both of them tore their ACL. They're dealing with other injuries on the defense. I really go back and forth. Tomorrow might be a different answer, but I think today, 50% plus, 0.1% says I'd want to have the game here just because, I'd like to see them win it at home and we have the home crowd. But tomorrow might be a different answer.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar spot. In the end, I want the game here. That's what it really kind of comes down to. I don't really feel I'm not scared of going into Denver. I think it's pretty close, like similar odds, like you said, but I'd rather the game on your home turf. Your ability to control the crowd noise. Obviously, Gillette will be booming and all that, but so I definitely lean having it here. But okay, that will wrap us up. Wrap this up for this week. Like I said, hopefully next week when we talk, they'll be in the AFC Championship game, and then we'll have plenty more to talk about for that matchup. And I would guess, we're getting into almost February. Pitchers and catchers report in the middle of February, I believe. Things are going to start to have to make moves if you're the Red Sox. So hopefully we see another move or two by then. So, okay. Until next time, we'll raise the banner and thank you all for listening.
Have a good night. Illegal screen.